You answered the question automatically, then felt the tension hit your body a few seconds later. Nothing serious had even happened. The conversation kept moving. Nobody looked upset. No arguments started. But something inside you stayed unsettled long after the interaction ended. Chosen one, that has been happening more often lately. Small moments that should feel normal suddenly leave you emotionally exhausted afterward. You replay conversations in silence. You notice hesitation before answering simple things. Your body reacts before your mind fully understands why. At first, it just feels confusing. Maybe stress, maybe exhaustion, maybe you have simply been carrying too much for too long. But slowly, another realization begins forming underneath all of it. The pressure is not only coming from life itself. Part of the pressure is coming from the version of you that can no longer pretend certain things still feel right. The strange part is how subtle the shift feels in the beginning. Nothing dramatic changes overnight. You still wake up the same way, still go to the same places, still speak to the same people. Externally, life continues moving almost identically. But internally, your experience inside those moments starts changing. You notice how quickly your energy disappears around certain conversations now. How often you pause before responding to messages. How difficult it becomes to ignore tension that once felt invisible. Someone asks something simple from you, and immediately your chest tightens before you answer. That reaction used to happen so fast you barely noticed it. Now you feel it while it is happening. And awareness changes the experience immediately. You begin realizing how much of your life has been built around automatic emotional adjustment, keeping the atmosphere smooth, avoiding discomfort, making yourself understandable. For years, those behaviors probably felt normal to you, natural even. But lately, something inside you keeps interrupting the pattern before it fully completes. You agree to something, then feel drained afterward. You leave conversations feeling emotionally scattered for reasons you cannot fully explain. Silence starts revealing things that constant movement used to hide. And because nothing externally appears catastrophic, part of you keeps trying to dismiss the feeling. That is what makes this stage difficult. Life still looks manageable from the outside. Meanwhile, internally, something important has already started changing. At some point, you probably tried forcing yourself back into the older version of yourself again. The easier version. The version that tolerated everything without feeling so much resistance underneath it. You tried moving normally again, responding normally again, pushing through the discomfort the way you always had before. But the pressure kept returning. Not loudly, quietly. You notice it before entering certain environments now. You notice it while staring at messages you suddenly do not want to answer immediately. Someone changes their tone slightly, and your nervous system reacts before your mind can explain the reaction away. That part becomes exhausting, because nothing outwardly dramatic may be happening at all. Most people around you probably continue acting like everything is normal. Meanwhile, internally, your body keeps responding as though something important is no longer aligning. At first, you may interpret that as weakness. Maybe you are becoming too sensitive. Maybe you are overthinking. Maybe isolation has changed you somehow. But eventually, the same emotional pattern repeats too consistently to ignore. The exhaustion always appears around the same kinds of interactions, the same emotional roles, the same environments, the same expectations. And slowly, awareness starts connecting what your body already recognized earlier. You are not only reacting to present moments, you are reacting to patterns you have participated in for years without fully seeing their emotional cost. That realization creates pressure immediately, because once awareness enters a pattern directly, unconscious participation becomes much harder to maintain. You feel yourself abandoning your own boundaries while it is happening now. You hear yourself agreeing while another part of you already feels resistance internally. The conversation continues normally on the outside, but internally, something no longer moves automatically the same way. And once that shift begins, the old emotional survival strategies stop feeling invisible. Most people misunderstand pressure completely. They think pressure means life is attacking them. But many times, pressure appears when awareness begins colliding with adaptation. That is why this season feels heavier than it looks from the outside. You are beginning to notice emotional patterns your identity once depended on ignoring. Not all at once, in layers. You notice how certain people expect emotional versions of you that no longer feel natural to maintain. How certain environments change your nervous system before anything even happens there. How some conversations leave you disconnected from yourself long after they end. And the strange part is that the old behaviors are still available. You can still perform them. You can still explain yourself carefully. Still smooth tension over quickly. Still make yourself emotionally accessible before even considering your own internal state. But now your body reacts differently during the process. The exhaustion arrives faster. The emotional heaviness lingers longer. You start feeling internally divided while participating in situations you once navigated automatically. That internal division becomes difficult to live with because awareness creates contrast. You begin seeing the distance between what you feel internally and what you continue tolerating externally. You feel it while driving home afterward in silence. You feel it sitting alone after another interaction that forced you away from yourself again. You feel it when your body hesitates before re-entering emotional dynamics your identity once normalized automatically. That is where the real pressure begins intensifying. Not because life suddenly became impossible, because unconscious participation is becoming impossible. And that realization changes the emotional meaning of everything slowly. Conversations that once felt ordinary now feel emotionally expensive. Environments that once felt familiar now create quiet internal resistance before you even arrive. Even your own reactions start surprising you sometimes. You no longer recover emotionally the same way after abandoning yourself inside certain situations. Part of you still wants to preserve the old identity because it helped you survive for years. But another part already knows the emotional cost has become too visible to ignore now. That tension creates exhaustion, not weakness, awareness. This is usually the stage where people begin distracting themselves constantly without fully realizing why. More noise, more stimulation, more scrolling, more emotional avoidance. Because sitting inside awareness for too long becomes uncomfortable when your external life still contains patterns your nervous system no longer trusts. You may notice emotional fatigue appearing before certain interactions even begin now. That matters. You may notice relief when plans get canceled that you once would have forced yourself to attend anyway. That matters too. You may notice how quickly your energy changes around people who require emotional performance from you constantly. Those moments are not random. They reveal internal reorganization already happening underneath the surface. And reorganization rarely feels inspiring in the beginning. Most people expect transformation to feel empowering immediately, but often, real transformation begins as emotional exhaustion. The old identity becomes harder to maintain. Certain emotional roles stop feeling believable. You begin realizing how much energy it took to constantly adjust yourself in order to preserve external stability. That realization alone changes the nervous system, because once the body recognizes the cost clearly, automatic participation starts weakening naturally. You notice hesitation appearing before the old reaction arrives. Someone asks something familiar from you, and internally there is now a pause, a quiet resistance. You stare at the message longer because something inside you no longer wants to re-enter the same emotional cycle automatically again. Externally, those moments may appear insignificant. Internally, they change everything, because awareness is reorganizing your relationship with yourself in real time. And identity reorganization creates loneliness sometimes, not because you are losing yourself, because you are losing unconscious emotional adaptations that once protected you. Even unhealthy patterns can feel emotionally safe when they helped you survive for years. part of you still wants to preserve them sometimes. That is normal. But awareness keeps interrupting the pattern now before it fully completes. And eventually, the emotional exhaustion of abandoning yourself becomes heavier than the discomfort of changing. That becomes the real turning point, not when life suddenly feels easier, when awareness becomes stronger than avoidance. Slowly, the pressure begins changing form, stops feeling random. It starts feeling directional. You no longer need immediate emotional resolution from every interaction. You stop explaining yourself automatically just to reduce tension in the room. You stop feeling responsible for stabilizing every emotional atmosphere around you. And because of that, life begins feeling cleaner internally. Not perfect, cleaner, more honest. You begin recognizing which relationships require performance and which ones allow presence. Which conversations leave you grounded afterward instead of emotionally scattered. Which environments allow your nervous system to relax naturally instead of preparing defensively before anything even happens. That awareness changes your decisions gradually, not through dramatic declarations, through quieter behavioral shifts. You respond slower now. You think longer before agreeing. You stop volunteering emotional energy automatically just because someone expects access to it. Some people notice the change immediately. Others only notice when they can no longer access the old version of you the same way anymore. And naturally, certain relationships begin reorganizing because of that. Some dynamics weaken once you stop carrying all the emotional weight yourself. Some conversations become shorter. Some connections become stronger because they no longer depend on performance. Nothing externally may collapse overnight, but internally your standards begin changing. The tension in your body matters now. The hesitation matters now. The emotional exhaustion afterward matters now. You stop arguing with those signals constantly, and slowly the distance between awareness and behavior begins narrowing. That changes your relationship with yourself completely, because now your awareness is no longer just something you notice afterward. It starts influencing your decisions in real time. That is when the heaviness begins transforming into clarity. Not because pressure disappears completely, because the pressure finally starts making sense. You realize something important. The discomfort was never only trying to hurt you. It was trying to interrupt patterns that were disconnecting you from yourself repeatedly. And once you understand that clearly, the entire season begins feeling different. Still uncomfortable sometimes, but no longer meaningless. Eventually, the pause stops feeling unfamiliar. It becomes part of how you move through life. You no longer react instantly just because someone expects emotional access from you. You no longer force yourself into emotional alignment with environments that drain you internally. You no longer override your own awareness the moment tension appears. There is less urgency inside you now. Not because you stopped caring, because you stopped disappearing inside automatic reactions. That changes your presence quietly. Your decisions feel steadier. Your energy feels less emotionally scattered. Even your silence feels different now. Some people may experience that shift as distance, but it is not distance. It is self-trust. You notice things earlier now. The tightening in your stomach before agreeing. The exhaustion before entering certain environments. The hesitation before re-entering emotional dynamics that no longer feel healthy internally. And most importantly, you no longer betray those signals automatically the way you once did. That is what changed everything. Not one dramatic breakthrough, not one perfect moment, a growing willingness to remain conscious while the old pattern was happening. That small shift reorganized your relationship with yourself completely. The pressure feels heavier now because something inside you can no longer participate unconsciously the way it once did. That is the real shift, not life becoming impossible, awareness becoming impossible to ignore. You thought the exhaustion meant something was wrong with you, but many times, exhaustion appears when an old identity stops fitting naturally. The conversations feel different now. The reactions feel different. Even silence feels different. And slowly, you begin understanding something important. You were never simply becoming more emotional. You were becoming more aware. Aware of what drains you. Aware of what no longer aligns. Aware of how much of your life was built around adaptation instead of truth. That awareness changes behavior gradually, not through force, through recognition. And eventually, the old version of you stops feeling automatic. Part of you still remembers who you used to be, but another part already knows you cannot move unconsciously the same way anymore. The pressure was never trying to destroy you. It was trying to interrupt the version of you that kept abandoning yourself automatically. And once you begin seeing that clearly, the heaviness starts feeling less confusing, not fully resolved, but precise. This is obsidian within, forged in the shadows, destined for more.